Hey everyone, welcome to another Keto and Crime Classic. Today we look at the Baptist Foundation of Arizona, not to be confused with the Southern Baptist Convention, and the case of Bill Crotts, who in 1990 to 1998 basically swindled thousands of devoted, faithful Baptists out of their money by preying on fears of breaking markets during the end times. He pushed things such as gold, silver, diamonds, other precious metals. Not that there's anything wrong with investing in these things. I'm not saying that at all. But they gave their money to the wrong person who preyed on their faith, preyed on their weakness, and basically swindled them out of millions of dollars. So another case of a wolf in sheep's clothing where religion is involved. Let's dive into Tracy telling you about the 1990s case of the Baptist Foundation of Arizona.
Not one investor has ever lost a penny of their investment or the interest they earn.
That's a lot of horse shit. Let's get into it.
Hey everybody, Keto Comic here with another White Collar Crime Wednesday. Today we're taking a look at the Baptist Foundation of Arizona, yet another church or religious scandal. It's kind of funny how there's so many of those, isn't there? But we're going to take a look at it, and I think one reason this is such a phenomenon is because faith is one of the few things in life we take sometimes without question, and I think that's why it's so easy for people to be taken advantage of. So that's why there's a lot of these, and I'll probably cover a lot more of them as the series goes on. But let's get into this one. Here you have Mr. Bill Crotts, or William Bill Crotts. He was the main perpetrator of this scandal, but he was the son of the founder of the Baptist Foundation of Arizona, which was founded in 1948 by his father, Southern Baptist minister Glenn Crotts, to be a charitable organization to help Baptist churches raise money and to help other charitable pursuits of the Southern Baptist Convention. It was heavily affiliated with the major Southern Baptist association in the country, the Southern Baptist Convention. And it basically was a way to put your money in for a charitable cause. They would pool it with other people, invest it, and then have a pool of money to pursue what the church would consider worthy things. You know, orphanages, building new churches, helping with hospitals, you name it. That's what they were supposed to do. And from 1948 till about 1985, that's exactly what they did. They helped individual parishioners, they helped missionary work, that's exactly what the foundation did. It was totally above board. In 1948, after his father retired, William Bill Crotts took over as president and CEO, and then he stumbled across another idea for the charitable foundation. Other than just pooling money to help worthy causes, he decided why not help members of Baptist churches and other religious people with their retirement. We can do this. So he kind of switched it around and switched the focus and kind of guided it into another direction. Now, there's not a whole lot on Bill's early growing up. Just suffice it to say he's from Arizona. Definitely the son of a preacher man, was raised in the church, became a minister himself, and therefore was the natural choice to take over after his father retired. And was well loved, still well loved, believe it or not, in the Phoenix, Arizona community where this took place. So, you know, loyalty is paramount, especially among religious people sometimes. So let's get into exactly what happened. Here you see one of the original 4 pillars of the Baptist Foundation of Arizona. Basically, response to the love of God expressed in Jesus Christ. The Baptist Foundation of Arizona is a ministry which is committed to providing asset management services to Christians who desire to benefit worthy ministries while earning market return on their investment. And this was actually developed by Bill Crotts, basically taking the focus from just pure donation into charitable causes into investment. Part investment, part charity. Now, what you have to remember is that this started taking place mid-80s. 1982 is when he took over. What you would consider a scam started about 1985. We will get into that. But at first, he was in the middle of a very booming housing market. And in the western area of the United States, Arizona, California, Washington State, housing was just absolutely blowing up. So at that point, it was decided that the safest place to put all of this investor money was in real estate, and that's exactly what they did. And it's just like in the mid-2000s when the stock housing market crashed. As long as the housing market went up, 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 everything was hunky-dory. There was plenty of returns, and there was plenty of money to give to charitable pursuits. But, you know, best laid plans of mice and men, you know. But it was mainly a ministry. It was a registered nonprofit, so it had limited tax liability. So it really was a safe place for people of faith, or so they thought, to put their money. All right. So as I said, it was founded in 1948 by Glenn Crotts. Bill took over in 1982. He switched the focus from pure charity to investment/charity, with real estate investment being their first and primary objective. He also made loans to churches and to parishioners at reasonable interest rates, also earning money for investors. And he was offering a guaranteed 6% returns to people that invested with the Baptist Foundation of Arizona. Now, I know what you all are thinking, that I've often said anybody that can guarantee returns, it's probably a scam. And yes, that's true. But these are very modest returns. What I'm talking about is people that guarantee 10, 15, 20%. Yes, that's very definitely not attainable except for maybe an elite 10 in the entire history of the stock market. But these were very modest returns. This was about the median return you could expect on an investment. So this wasn't too far-fetched. And what made it easy to sell is he had a captured audience. He was a Baptist minister himself. The Baptist Foundation was well respected with both churches and the Southern Baptist Convention, which was the #1 Baptist religious association in the country. Still in existence today. There are still Baptist foundations in many states that are not affiliated with this one, but they still have a good reputation and they're still out there doing this kind of work. So this was not unusual. He had a captured audience, which meant he could go from church to church and pitch this. I mean, you had a lot of people that were going to retire anyway, so why not put your money where it can help the kingdom of God? Because especially among Baptists, or what we call evangelicals, and they really want to go out and preach the word of God based on, you know, Jesus's great commission, go out and preach the word in all the land. They really believe in that. So they felt it was better to invest and donate their money to a religious organization that would help promote that great commission instead of just putting it with a Wall Street firm that was just there for pure gain. So he had a captured audience, and over the course of the years he ran the foundation, and he ran it from 1982 until the end of this in 1999. He had over 11,000 investors, all investing an average of about $50,000. So just think about that. That's millions of dollars that he got from these people. And at first, it was on the up and up. He actually did invest the money that he was given into real estate. With the returns, he gave their 6% back and put the rest of it into what they considered worthy pursuits. About 1983, Bill Crotts hired Thomas Grabinski, who you will hear a lot about as we go on, as his general counsel, basically a lawyer, to help him with this investment. And for a long time, it went along fine. Everybody was getting their returns. There was no problems. But then enter 1985, when the housing market started to slowly slide. It wasn't a big crash like we saw in the financial crisis of 2006, but it was a steady decline that started showing diminishing returns for BFA investments. So that was a problem. But instead of being honest about it and actually telling investors what was going on, they started very systematically trying to hide it. And this scam went deep. It was multifaceted. It was scattered among several different types of scams, and in the end, it crumbled like a house of cards. But basically from 1985 until about 1995, when the housing market really crashed in the 90s, you saw a whole bunch of mounting losses. Well, what Bill Crotts and 𝗂𝗂𝘀 decided to do at that point was to hide those losses. Instead of just being honest on investor statements and investor returns and investor meetings, they decided to get rid of it. So think Enron here, where you kind of get rid of the bad assets and the bad liabilities. So what they did is just about what Enron did. So what Enron did was not unusual, was not new under the sun. Basically, they created subsidiaries, some for profit, some not for profit, and they started sliding the bad real estate investments and the bad losses into those companies to hide them. That was scam number one. The name of the major company they used for this purpose was called ALO. And Gschiebinski and Bill Crotts were on the board of that company. In fact, you'll see a pattern as we get into this. All the fake companies they invented all had a Baptist Foundation board member as the only board member or the only executive officer listed for all these subsidiary companies. So it was definitely a deep-reaching scandal. So that was their first scam. They started hiding the losses in shell companies. And then from there, they went into what they call a good bank, bad bank scam. Now, this also involved ALO, which was on the books as a lending house. Now, if you're my age and you can remember the 80s and 90s, you know that there was something that was pretty prominent in that era known as a Savings and Loan Association. Now, there was a huge scandal with that involved Ronald Reagan and a bunch of other high-level politicians that kind of caused that industry to crash. But there was an alternative to banks called savings and loans, which were just simply loan houses where people would go in and get a loan, and then they would pay back the loan, and they would make their money off the interest and also investing the money. So this type of work wasn't unusual. What they were doing wasn't unusual. So ALO was basically a savings and loan house that wrote loans. But the thing of it is, they were writing the majority of their loans to people that were either affiliated with the BFA or to these false shell companies, and they were being secured basically with IOUs. So think about it. Bill Crotts would write a loan in the name of ALO to 𝗂𝗂𝘀, for example. Gschiebinski would guarantee that loan with an IOU. Basically, he took a piece of paper, he wrote IOU $50,000, signed it, gave it to Bill Crotts. That was the security for these loans. So instead of writing loans on assets or collateral like most savings and loans would do at the time, there was nothing to secure the loan. It would just make the loan to the person, and it was secured with an IOU, and then that IOU went into a safety deposit box as collateral. Think about that. A piece of paper guaranteed $50,000. And so they would take the losses from the bad real estate investments, put them into ALO, and then lend the losses out to other people, securing them with an IOU. That was scam number two. The other part of the scam was inflating their real estate holdings. And they weren't only trying to hide the bad real estate investments, they were trying to pump it up. Basically, instead of just taking the losses and getting it off the books, they were also trying to hide the losses by inflating what the property was actually worth. So let's say you had a piece of property that they said was worth $1.5 million, when in actuality it was only worth about $750,000. So they were overinflating what their real estate holdings were actually worth, and taking out loans on that property with other loan houses and other banks to pay off their investors. And this is where we get into the next prong of the scandal, which was a basic Ponzi scheme. You remember all the other Ponzi schemes we've talked about, where they take current investors, new investors' money, and use that money to pay off the older investors that were wanting their returns. That's what they did. They had to go around and continue to recruit to keep money coming in. So they had all this money coming in, which was going out to pay their old investors, whose money had been lost in bad real estate and lended out in shell loans from shell companies, and also had been used to help secure loans that would never be paid back on real estate that wasn't as worth as much as they said it was. So think about this. For it to be a religious association, they had the degree on scams and how to run a scam. It was so, I don't see how they kept up with it. It was so multifaceted. So that was the other. It was just a out and out Ponzi scheme. And finally, probably what really got them into trouble and got them investigation started was they were selling condo communities that had on-site medical care, on-site nursing home care, on-site in-house nursing to elderly people. And what they were basically leasing condos or apartments within these, gated caretaker communities, which do exist and are actually very nice for retired people. They were leasing these things and then turning around and selling them to elderly parishioners. So these parishioners, these elderly people, thought they were buying a condo that they could turn around and sell just like you would any other condo. But in all actuality, they weren't. They were only subleasing them. But the Baptist Foundation of Arizona was leading them to believe that they had purchased these condos when in actuality they were just subletting them. So when these people wanted to turn around and sell them for whatever reason, maybe they wanted to go to an actual nursing home or they wanted to move in with a family member and wanted to sell their condo, they couldn't, and their money was gone. So you had a whole lot of disgruntled family members that started to question that practice and go to Bill Crotts in his main headquarters there in Phoenix, Arizona, to question these things. And he had always had a very open door policy to his investors. If you called and asked a question, you would get an answer. But as we crept closer and closer to 1998, 1999, you started seeing him not answering questions, not allowing people in the office as willy-nilly as he once did. And so a lot of questions started to pop up. So basically, once these condo contracts started to come up bad, you had that investigation started. And then you had one internal accountant, who shall remain anonymous, actually went to the district attorney in Phoenix, Arizona, and said, I believe there's some fraud going on with the Baptist Foundation of Arizona, and I think they're fraudulently hiding liabilities in shell companies. Well, at that point, the district attorney did not pursue or did not investigate because it was just that accountant's word who had been terminated versus BFA's word. So it was kind of he said, she said. But the thing that kind of one of the main things that kept the district attorney from doing the investigation is that our old buddy, accounting firm Arthur Andersen, who we've seen attached to so many scandals, was auditing BFA's books twice a year, every year, and put out glowing reports saying that everything that Bill Crotts stated was correct. So you had Arthur Andersen, was one of the big 5 accounting firms, backing this association up. So the district attorney was not about to take the word of one single staff accountant that was no longer in her job against Arthur Andersen. However, one concerned parishioner made a call to the Securities and Exchange Commission and reported that they felt their investment statements were fraudulent, that basically they had invested over $100,000 with Bill Crotts, and they had had it on loan to him for about 5 years, and they decided they wanted to take some of their earnings and go buy a new vehicle, a new van, as a matter of fact. And they went to the office and applied to withdraw $6,000. They would absolutely not give it to them. They came up with every excuse in the book why they couldn't get their money. And this was at the point that investment was starting to dry up. You had a stock market, not a stock market crash, but a real estate investment crash following by a slow decline of the stock market. So people weren't investing as much. It wasn't as prevalent as it was in the 80s when this first started. Now you're in the mid to late 90s, and the stock market has kind of taken a downward plunge, and people weren't investing as much as they were. So that source of money had dried up. Remember, everything else they have, there's no cash flow whatsoever. They're simply shifting liabilities from this company to another company to hide it, making fraudulent loans. You know, all their loan money that they had taken out for loans that they secured with buildings that weren't worth as much as they said had dried up. And by this time, new investors had dried up, so they were hurting for money. And Bill Crotts would not give this investor $6,000 to go buy a new van. Well, I can tell you right now, you don't tell an elderly Southern woman she can't have her money. She went and raised the roof with the SEC. The SEC started to investigate, along with the Arizona DA, who, once the SEC got involved, decided we might ought to get involved too. And in 1998, a formal investigation was started. Well, when it was all said and done, they found $530 million in liabilities or debts against $70 million in assets, which in most mathematical formulas that equals bankruptcy, and that's exactly what happened. 1999, Baptist Foundation of America declared bankruptcy. It was the largest nonprofit bankruptcy in U.S. history at that time, and there were 26 counts of fraud and intent to defraud levied against 8 members of the BFA board. And let's see what happened.
Nation of Arizona will be facing for fraud. A judge handed down the sentence in the case against the former president and CEO of the BFA, William Crotts, and the former senior VP, 𝗪𝗂𝗪. Kirsten Joyce is live with the sentence and reaction from both sides of the issue. Kirsten?
Patty, that sentencing came down late this afternoon at about 4 o'clock. The judge sentenced William Crotts to a total of 15 years on both counts. Now, they would run concurrently, so he would see a maximum of 8 years behind bars. 𝗪𝗂𝗪 was sentenced to a total of 11 years on both counts. He would be looking at a maximum of 6 years behind bars. And both individuals were ordered to pay back $159 million in restitution.
I feel good about that. It's not the minimum, it's not the maximum, but it's better than nothing.
Robert Shaw feels justified, even though he lost $250,000. Prosecutors had asked for the maximum, an aggravated sentence, because the prosecution said it wasn't just that 11,000 investors lost money, many of their life savings, but the fact that both these men permanently altered their lives.
There were, like I said, several members of both the BFA board and outside sources that were also affiliated with this that had charges levied against them. The sentencing started, the trial ran for about 3 years, and then along with appeals and everything else, finally you had sentencing for the main perpetrators, which was Bill Crotts and 𝗪𝗂𝗪, the two that signature was on every bad loan form, every bad investment, on the IOUs for most of the bad loans they had made. So they were the main perpetrators. They were finally sentenced July 26, 2006, which was actually the first sentencing of the trial. But basically, Bill Crotts was found guilty of 3 counts of fraud and attempt to defraud. He was sentenced to 2 8-year sentences that were to be served concurrently. Now that means side by side, which is basically 1 8-year sentence. I don't know why it was levied like that, but it was. And he served his 8 years and is now out and running in another and working for another investment group. I don't get that, but okay. 𝗪𝗂𝗪 received a concurrent sentence of 6 years and 5 years, which meant he was out in 6 years. And then these other members of the board, which had a lesser stake in it, they just worked there, and their names had appeared on documents because of their positions, and they also were kind of complacent that they didn't report it. But you had Donald L. Deardorff, who was a senior vice president, and the controller, who should have known better, spent 4 years in prison and had to pay a fine of $150 million. And that's another thing. There were fines of well over $100 million connected to all these sentences. But the thing of it is, after they've already frozen the association's assets and they've frozen these people's individual assets, they're all filing bankruptcy. So the majority of that never got paid. 𝗪𝗪𝗁 who was a director of one of the false shell companies whose stated position was to help build churches, also received a 2-year suspended sentence and a $150 million fine. Our good old friend Arthur Anderson, after being sued by the state of Arizona, agreed to pay $217 million to settle litigation, but in the end backed out on that promise and said they weren't giving nobody nothing. And as a result, they were banned from doing business in Arizona. And then after Enron and WorldCom, they eventually lost their license to practice in the field of accounting nationwide. So, as I'd said, if you could go back in time, don't do business with any company that Arthur Anderson audits, please. All of the victims, and there were over 11,000 of them, to the tune of about $593 million, all received a settlement based on what the government could collect from these people, whether it was personal assets or the BFA's assets. They all received a small settlement, undisclosed, to help recoup some of their losses. But the sad thing is the majority of them never got back on their feet. The majority of the victims were people in their 50s and 60s, 70s that were already on the verge of retirement, and most of them had to go back to work, sell houses, move in with family to self-correct from the loss of their life savings. A lot of them did lose their entire life savings, and it's a sad situation. I liken this to the Bernie Madoff situation, which I think this one's even worse because you were a religious organization preying on other religious people. So, and that was pretty much it. All these people served less than 10 years, paid some money, and are free to live their lives as they were. And the ironic thing is, a lot of the people, even the people that were defrauded, came forward and testified on the behalf of Bill Crotts and Thomas Grabinski, saying they didn't think that they set out to run a scam, that it just sort of happened. Things got out of control, and they didn't know how to handle it, so they got scared and they hid it. And maybe that was true. For all the interviews and things I see, I don't think they intended to defraud anybody. I think they got in over their heads and then they hid it, which I guess I could see that because no one really likes that kind of confrontation. But in the end, a lot of people got hurt, and including them. I mean, they're probably banned from certain types of jobs and things like that. But in the end, it was just a really bad situation. So the lesson we can take from this, just because it's got Jesus on it, doesn't mean it's a good thing. Do your research, people. Do your research, please. Please. And that's the very sad story of the Baptist Foundation of Arizona. Like I said, there are other Baptist foundations out there that are legit. Don't judge them by this one bad apple. This just happened to be one. And I hope you enjoy this. Next week, I'm going to do part 1 of the Bernie Madoff scandal, which is going to take me probably 2 to 3 weeks to get through. It's so encompassing, so get prepared for that. I'm gearing up for it. And I hope you enjoyed this one. Please like, comment, share, subscribe. Let me know what you think. 𝗙𝗵𝗁, Keto Comic. Out.